welcome to One on One. My name is Bridget Otu. Today on One on One, we're engaging Professor RANSFORD GYAMPO, a political scientist, on a number of issues. The Electoral Commission had earlier proposed November to conduct the elections against the NDC's decision, to say, look, we don't have the time. EC had argued that, well, they want to give the party that wins enough time to transition and whatnot. Now they've backtracked. They also talked about the indelible ink, which was fiercely opposed by the majority leader in Parliament, Osei Mensah, ex-majority leader in Parliament, Osei Mensah, because he has resigned as majority leader. We'll also speak to Professor RANSFORD GYAMPO on the leadership change in Parliament. What does that do for the 2024 Bawumia campaign? Does it have any link whatsoever? Professor GYAMPO, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Okay. Ambushing me in my office.
Right.
Yeah.
Professor GYAMPO, the Electoral Commission is, when they decide to do something, they go ahead and do it, regardless of the opposition. Unfortunately, we've seen them backtrack on the decision to say, okay, November proposal did not happen. Now they're doing December. They're sticking to the December 7th date. The indelible link, they backtrack. Is it an Electoral Commission that is undecisive? And does that mean Ghanaians will lose faith in them? Or what does it say about the posturing of the EC to backtrack and say, okay, let's stick to December 7th and let's do with indelible ink?
Well, but the issue about the change of day for election is something that has to be approved by Parliament. And so it doesn't lie in the mouth of any Electoral Commission boss or management to say that this is what we are going to do and that is cast in stone. You can decide, but Parliament will have to also decide on it. You remember that this issue came up in the lead up to the, I think, 2016
election, which was proposed by now opposition. Yes.
Yeah. It was not proposed by the now opposition. I would tell you about the genesis of that proposal shortly. But it came up in the lead up to 2016 elections, and Parliament voted against it. How did it originate? You see, the idea behind it itself is good. Following the 2008 presidential election, we for the first time in the history of Ghana's Republic, I think we held election thrice.
Yeah.
The first one, the runoff, and then the time. Okay. Yeah. So our constitution says that if elections fail to produce a clear majority within 21 days, you should do a runoff. So from November 7, you do 21 days, then you are getting to tail end of November to do a runoff. Okay. And if you look at that runoff and then the time election that the time decided that also took place, then the outgoing regime and the incoming regime had just about 3 days for transition to hand over power.
Right.
And if you are handing over my small office today, if I'm no longer here as UTAC president and I'm handing over, you need a period of time to be able to brief the incoming one what you've been doing and what he must do, etc., etc. So in time example, or in the case of the 2008 elections, we're just going to have 3 days for transition. Even without time, you're going to have a limited number of days because if you get into the end of November, if you get to the end of December, election is December 7.
Yes.
And so 3 weeks for runoff will be the till end of
December. Going to January.
And then you are going to go into 7th January. Yeah. Then that will give you just about 1 week of transition, which is not enough.
Sure.
And so that is the reason why then I was working at the IE Institute of Economic Affairs.
Sure.
We had what we call the Ghana Political Parties Program. I was the coordinator. We were the first to present proposals for electoral reforms to the Electoral Commission at Farijan.
Right.
Okay. So we worked with the political parties to agree on various aspects of our electoral processes that must be fine-tuned and that must undergo reform. This particular proposal about the need to bring election day forward from December 7th to November 7th emanated from us at the IEA Secretariat, where G. Mensah was executive director.
Sure.
So we agreed on this proposal. We discussed it with the political parties. They bought into it. Subsequently, the Electoral Commission constituted what we call the Electoral Reforms Committee, which had representation from, I represented the IEA on it. Sure. The MPP had Peter McMahon, Kwabena Japan, and later Peter McMahon, and then later Kwabena Japan on it. The NDC had Asiedun Ketia on it. I think Kwabena Bomfe represented the smaller parties. And then we had other representation from civil society organizations, all serving on the Electoral Reforms Committee. Our chief resource person then was, I think, His Lordship Justice Kibo Pramana, who is now a Supreme Court judge. He was the resource person. We went through all the processes and identified certain key areas of our electoral processes that require reform. Key among them was the election date. So the recommendation emanated from the IEA Secretariat. It was bought into by the IEA sponsored Ghana Political Parties Program. Then we sent this proposal also to the Electoral Reforms Committee, and then it was also agreed upon. We presented it to Afarijan, he sanctioned it, and so it was supposed to go to Parliament for a decision, for the decision to be confirmed and concretized. Unfortunately, when it went to Parliament, I don't know what happened, but there was no consensus on it, and so it was shot against. And my problem with Ghana is that, and especially with the political elites, is that oftentimes when a serious decision is, has to be taken, these political elites and political parties will nominate people to go represent them on bodies that are supposed to take decisions. When decisions are taken, these representatives, I don't know, are unable to go back to their parent body to convince them that this particular decision is something that has been thought through. We have looked at the pros and cons and all that. And so it's a way to go. They sit around the decision table, and yet when it comes to the crucial moment of concretizing the decision, they leave it to those who have completely no clue, no knowledge, and no information as to how a particular decision was arrived at. In this case, I was expecting Kwabena Japan and Peter McMahon and Asiedun Ketia. These were the top political elites who were serving, representing the interests of the political parties on the Electoral Reforms Committee. I was expecting them to go to Parliament to convince them or to explain the rationale for having that particular proposal to them. I think they didn't do that, and so Parliament shut it down. I am not surprised that the G. Mensah-led EC has brought it back for discussion, because G. Mensah, as we speak, has the proposal for all the proposals for electoral reforms sitting on the table. So I'm sure that as she goes through, she may be implementing them one after the other. So,
but they say it will be tabled for 2028. Do you see that happening, or you think that we'll get there and then we'll go through the same cycle of this that we are?
The political it depends on the consensus, the level of consensus that is built between the political elites with the Electoral Commission, and how they are able to go to Parliament to get parliamentarians convinced about the consensus that they have reached. It is only then
is it hypocrisy then? I mean, if you say the political parties, they were part of it in the what is it called, the research phase, to see if it was feasible, and then now you have to go public and speak in support of why, because you were part of the team. Why do you think?
I don't know, but I don't know, but that is the challenge with Ghana and the kind of politicking that we practice. Remember, I did a study on how to deal with winner-takes-all politics and made a case for a national development plan as one solution to bring national development plan whose preparation would enjoy extensive participation from all across the political divide, such that, you see, the plan will be an overarching plan, and then different manifestos will show the different ways in which the overarching plan would be achieved. Okay, and I said that plan, in preparing it, it must receive input and support and participation and contributions, comments, suggestions from all across the political divide. And then they would, so that if all of them owns the plan, it becomes binding, sort of, on the other successor regimes. With this idea, I saw Nimoy Thompson, who was then heading the National Development Planning Commission, tabling this idea of Ghana having a 40-year national plan. And I can tell you that in trying to prepare that plan, he consulted, he spoke to the political parties who nominated their top echelons to serve on the processes towards the preparation of this plan. It was done. Immediately, the power changed hands. The MPP said, well, it's not our plan, they abandoned it. And I was expecting those that the party nominated to serve on the processes to convince their party echelons that, look, this is a good thing, we all participated in it, and it's something that will help Ghana, and so let's run with it. But they didn't do so. So my view is that oftentimes when it gets to a situation where politicians will have to nominate key people to go serve on certain bipartisan decision-making process, they easily nominate people who then do not have influence within the party. So you can go and take the balls that you participated, but when we get into the driving seat, it's not what you have gone to agree on that is going to influence us. If we do that, then we cannot achieve any meaningful progress in terms of our efforts to arrive at consensus and bipartisan consensus as to what we have to do as a nation. It's a problem. So in this regard, I was expecting, you see, let me tell you, when the processes, the Constitutional Review Committee process kick-started, they brought in, MPP felt that it was within the MPP fraternity, it was McMahon who knows election. Okay, so Kwabena Japan then was the General Secretary. He nominated McMahon to serve on that committee. And Asiedun Ketia, it was the General Secretary, was representing the NDC. Now soon there was rumor, complaint about Kwabena Japan that he's not committed to serving the cause of the party. He should look at NDC. NDC has charged his scribe, leading scribe, Asiedun Ketia, to serve on the committee, but he, Kwabena Japan, instead of going there himself, has nominated McMahon. So Kwabena Japan, out of frustration, had to recall McMahon and then bring on board himself. And at that committee,
because it wasn't a competing of general secretaries.
It was not. Yeah, no. But so at that committee, I'll tell you that then, see, to the NDC that is opposing that proposal, okay, well, I mean, it's not, they are not opposing it in its substance, but I think they think that the time is too short for us to go there. But I'll tell them that around that time, it was Asiedun Ketia who had the field day, because when we talk about elections and all that, Asiedun Ketia around that time had superior knowledge, you know, on the processes than Kwabena Japan. But they forced him to be there, and Asiedun Ketia dominated that. I was there, but we could see that his views held much sway in the proposals for electoral reform. And so I was expecting that he would then have gone to his people to tell them that, look, around the time that this proposal was made, my views held sway, and it's something that is good. So let us implement it. But of course, I, in a way, also agree with the party's position that they feel that if we're going to implement this, something that probably we should have discussed it 2 years ago, or we should have psyched people up 2 years ago, so that they would use the idea to shape their own electioneering campaign calendar and order. So you cannot just get up and say, within less than 10 months to our election, you want to implement this. It would sort of create some uneasiness, you know, on the part of the leading political party contenders in the 2024 election campaign.
So you worked with Madam Jean Mensah at IEA, and she's now the 14, and now she's the Electoral Commission boss.
Yes.
Is the woman you knew at IEA same woman at EC? In terms of work ethics, of course, yeah.
Well, Jean Mensah is a very hard-working woman, and I always tell people the name RANSFORD GYAMPO, the brand RANSFORD GYAMPO was made by Jean Mensah. She was the first person who put me before TV cameras and said, well, at the IEA here, it is you yourself, your confidence, your telephone, your computer, and then the rest of the world. And she trained me and helped me to build confidence in myself. I know there are so many people, if you put cameras in front of them, and all this lighting, you forget about everything. It's Jean Mensah who trained me as to how to do it. Everything that I have become in terms of research work, scholarly publication, I learned all these things under Jean Mensah. And so for me, she's been a good woman to me. In terms of hard work, she works very hard. She's a go-getter. She knows how to get a piece of work accomplished. It doesn't matter if we have to get up at midnight. She'll call me at midnight for us to strategize about what we are going to be doing. And so she's an excellent woman in terms of getting things done and in terms of hard work. But you see, working under funding from a funding body outside the shores of your country, the pressures are different from working under a government of your own country, where things may be a bit relaxed. If you ask me to tell you about the Jean Mensah that I know, then I can tell you the Jean Mensah.
I want to know Jean Mensah. You've told me about Jean Mensah you knew as a IEA boss and a person. A woman who works, hard. But what about EC boss? I mean, criticism has been that the EC, when they have a certain posture, I mean, especially, NDC, they continuously talk about the fact that the way she handles them. There was a time that a press release came from the Electoral Commission, and it was almost as though it was written by a foot soldier. Like the tone of it was almost insult-ridden, mistakes. And she is the chair of the EC. What about that?
My teacher, Professor Michael Quinn, one dawn called me and said that certain things about people who have been your bosses,
you don't say.
You shouldn't be saying them
publicly. Right.
But I think that so that since then. It slowed me down. I have a lot of respect for Michael Quay. It slowed me down in the way I look at things, especially about somebody who trained me and who has been very good to me.
Sure.
But generally, I think the Electoral Commission has faced a certain problem that she's also gotten into. I call it relational incompetence.
Sure.
Okay, it was there at Justice Joseph Ofori-Boateng, who was our
first
INEC. We used to call it INEC,
like what?
National Electoral Commission.
Right.
It was headed by Justice Joseph Ofori-Boateng, then Afari Jan. And then he stayed on for long, and then Charlotte and Jean Mensah. Relational incompetence. See, relational competence has to do with how to deal with people who are intransigently opposed against everything that you do.
Sure.
Historically, the history of our Fourth Republic show that parties in government are always assumed to be in bed with the Electoral Commission, and parties in opposition are always opposing whatever the EC does. And the EC itself has not been able to help matters that much, because so far they haven't been able to build a very offensive, competent, and proactive communication outlet that makes their case for them. From 1992 up to now, we haven't had that. And so, oftentimes, things that are going to be done by the Electoral Commission, you hear party general secretaries and party bigwigs from the ruling party announcing it, even prior to Electoral Commission saying so. It is bad. And you hear these top ruling party bigwigs going on radio and TV defending the Electoral Commission. But I'm looking at an Electoral Commission that would get up and say, don't speak for me. Even when they are defending you, you tell them, thank you very much. We have what it takes to defend ourselves. And so we reject your defense, for us. Then you are sending a certain signal. But in terms of relational competence, I'm thinking about how you try to build bridges, how you try not to overly assert your independence over your stakeholders, but how you try to work with them such that it becomes easier for you to reach consensus with those who are always in opposition to whatever you do. Sure. You will be able to do that by ensuring that you constantly assert your independence even from the ruling party. Sure. Once you do that, then it sends a signal that you are not embedded in the ruling party. Okay, and then you try and empathize, you try and dialogue with the opposition. It is not always helpful to dialogue with them at the very formalized dialoguing setting. Okay. If you want to build relational competence, it is not. Sometimes you dialogue with them behind the scenes before you get to the formalized setting. So by the time you get to the formalized setting, I see Kwe will say, no, me agbena. You are done behind the scenes. Okay, right? You are done behind the scenes. So sometimes it is just about a phone call. Okay, Asia Dunketia was once the chairperson of the Ghana Political Parties Program that was sponsored by the IEA. Okay, the rule there is that the General Secretary and National Chairman of the ruling party chairs the program. And so, McMenu has been chair before, McMenu, and then Ohin too, they've been chairs before. Asiedun Ketia, the late Wayu Kwabene J, they've been chairs. I mean, so they've taken turns. So I'm saying that there's been several relationships that have been built with these political elites long before, okay, the current EC assumed office. So I'm thinking that in building relations, sometimes you leverage on the existing relationship you have with them behind the scenes. Sometimes it's a phone call to agree to talk. Yes, we know you say you don't like this, but what really is the concern? Okay, sometimes if somebody becomes so aggressive and is opposed to you, the idea of even driving or going to the person, okay, even if you go to the person behind the scenes to talk to, and the person disagrees with you, the idea of you showing that courtesy and humility and going to his office, okay, lowers or softens his or her position against you at a formalized setting. Right. So you get somebody telling you that, well, I still disagree with you, but when we get to the plenary, I would approach my comments with some caution and trepidation. Okay, I expect the electoral, but unfortunately, the Electoral Commission is always looking at the cloth of independence around it and using that to attempt to bully the parties in opposition. But you cannot bully them because without them, you cannot have the Electoral Commission.
Like for a long time, in the NDC boycotted IPAC. And they say, well, it's not mandatory. It's something that, EC said, we just extended that so we can have, but that you don't say that.
Without them, you cannot. You cannot have your own, even the institutional piece that you require to do your work, you will not have it. And so I know a lot of people were talking to the NDC behind the scenes. Some of us, when we got the opportunity, we spoke to their top echelons that, look, it is in your own interest, and then let us not continue to build this semblance or tension between you and then the EC, because it's not good for our national peace and all that. So I'm happy that at the end of the day, cool heads have prevailed, and the NDC has gone back to the IPAC. But I will call on the Electoral Commission that responsibility lie on its head more than the political parties in building relational competence just for the purposes of assuring institutional peace for the Electoral Commission. I can go about it. You are better off if NDC, MPP, and the other parties all are in ad idem with you about whatever you want to do. Then we'll get some peace of mind. And so, like I said, my boss.
Do you reach out to her privately when?
Oh yes, sometimes when I bash her, she will send me a message also. But I mean, that's why she's like a sister to me.
Sure.
So occasionally we do WhatsApps and all that. Right. She's a good woman, and I think that if she's able to do well in building on relational competence, I think she would go places because it's
not that they are in bed with governments, but it's that the way they have handled, like you call it, relational incompetence is what has given credence to that.
Yes, you see, because at the IEA Ghana Political Parties program, okay, she was working with the MPP and she was working with the NDC, CPP, and PNC at the same time. Okay, and my understanding as to why she was appointed the electoral commissioner had to do with the fact that she had worked with political parties, all of them. And so such a person, it becomes difficult for me as an independent assessor to say that she is in bed with one party or the other, because she was working with all of them. We were all working with all of them at the same time. And so it becomes difficult for me to tag her, as being in bed with the.
But it's just a question of relational.
Yeah, I think that what can help shed that tag that people are trying to let her wear by force is how to build her relations with the opposition. Okay. If you're able to do so and do it well, then that tag will be shed.
All right. We're taking a break. When we come back, we'll speak to Prof about why Ghana has not been able to push through with this idea of having a third force. What is money the main reason why we don't have a strong third force? We'll be right back. So welcome back to 101. My guest is a political scientist, Professor RANSFORD GYAMPO, who is also the president of the University Teachers Association of Ghana, University of Ghana campus. Prof, so before the break, we were talking about EC and how they could build, good relationship, especially with the opposition. One other thing, I don't know whether it's called opposition, but they said a failed coup in Parliament, where earlier there was a report that Alexander Fenyamarkin, who is member of Parliament for Ifuti, was going to be majority leader. And then you had a press conference led by the second Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Joseph Say, who say, look, nothing of a sort is happening. Then late in the night, next day, and then a letter comes and say, Osei Chimensa Bonsu has resigned as majority leader. So it was a coup, not a coup, but there's a coup. What's going on, Prof?
It shows that the parliamentary arm of government is manipulated oftentimes by bodies that are outside Parliament.
How?
Well, I would explain.
Sure.
You see, there are three arms of government. And in order not to upset the balance of power that must exist between these three arms of government, each of them must be somewhat independent of each other, so that they can serve as countervailing authority to themselves. When we say countervailing authority, it means there must always be a power to counter the exercise of power. Why? Because Lord Acton says power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the executive arm of government must check the exercise of powers of Parliament in a way. How? For instance, if Parliament passes a bill, it doesn't become a law until the President signs. That is a check-in relationship. In much the same way, every bill emanating from the executive arm of government must also be scrutinized, or every policy that is made, policies that are made, international agreements that are reached and all that must all be brought to Parliament. How the government wants to make use of our money through budgets preparation. Budgets must be approved by Parliament before government can expend our money, and that's a checking relationship. So for me to be able to check you, I should be independent of you. For you to be able to check me, you should also be independent of me.
Yeah.
And that is the doctrine of separation of powers and checks and balances. Separation of powers as advocated by I think as a Baron de Montesquieu, okay, a French political scientist.
Okay.
Now, in our part of the world, it appears that even though, for instance, the executive arm of government and the legislative arm of government are supposed to be somewhat independent of themselves, just so that there can be some checks and balances, we have opted for this kind of neo-presidential arrangement that other people call it the hybrid constitution. But we've opted for this kind of neo-presidential arrangement that gives the executive arm of government a certain say and certain control over the legislative arm of government in a manner that upsets the balance of power that must exist between them. And so now the president has all powers under the 1992 Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay, listen to this. We have always argued that the 1992 Constitution was not prepared or made for the present day political elites. The 1992 Constitution was not made for President Akufo-Addo. It was not made for J. Kufuor. It was not made for John Mahama or Atano. It was made for one person called Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings.
Yes.
He was a military ruler. It got to a certain point in time in the epoch of our political history, the application of political conditionality became a condition for which international aid could be given. i.e., if you don't democratize, we will not give you international aid. So Jerry Rawlings, who was a soldier, was forced to resign from the military and to conduct election in which he himself was a footballer, the match commissioner, the linesman, and the referee. And he won that election hands down. In preparing the 1992 Constitution, he himself openly came out to say he's not a fan of multi-party democracy. Okay? So in preparing the 1992 Constitution, he was assured that, look, we'll prepare the Constitution, but it will give you the powers, the same powers that you used to exercise when you were a soldier. And so don't worry. He prepared that Constitution, and then he used it. When he was using it, his opponents were complaining that the Constitution was granting too much power to the president. But the opponents got into power, and power is sweet. And so they refused to do anything about the Constitution until Professor Mills decided to review it. And because Akufo-Addo also got into power. And as we are plagued with the challenge of policy discontinuity, and as power is also sweet, Akufo-Addo has abandoned the constitutional review process. But what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that the Constitution gives too much powers to the executive arm of government in a manner that makes the president a political king Kong. You know King Kong?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one arm of government that is required to check the exercise of the powers of the executive arm of government is Parliament. Yeah. But in tandem with the practice of political King Kongism, the executive arm of government or the executive president has gone out of its way to also take over the powers of the legislative arm of government. Yeah. How? Number one, the president is appointing his ministers from Parliament. Once you are a minister and you've been appointed from Parliament, it becomes difficult for you to oppose the president in Parliament.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yes.
Number two, those members of Parliament who are looking forward to ministerial reshuffle so that they can also be appointed, they are looking up to the president even more than his appointees. And so when there is an issue before Parliament, they shout, yeah, the most. That's number two. Number three, in deciding on who must be the Speaker of Parliament, the executive president would want to play a role. They played a role, it's just that it backfired and then Speaker Baldwin emerged.
Yes.
Okay, in deciding on who must lead as majority leader, who must head various committees, the executive arm of government wants to control that. Now, it is in that spirit of the executive arm of government controlling the leadership and headships of Parliament that we had this issue that we're talking about. That has now resulted in a voluntary, compulsory resignation of Osei. I call it voluntary, compulsory resignation. You see, it tells you, like I said, it tells you that somebody is manipulating things from outside Parliament. And I put the blame, the corporate or the one doing that, it's not even so much about the party, but it's about the executive arm of government. You recall that, as you rightly indicated, Joe Osei led a press conference, which in my view was not so necessary.
Yeah.
But he held a press conference saying that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And then later we're told that the president was going to meet
there was a meeting
majority caucus at the Jubilee House.
Yeah.
Then the meeting took place. The next thing we heard was that the man himself has resigned. And I'm saying that I'm putting it to them that it's not that the man himself has resigned. It was a voluntary, compulsory resignation. So even though it is made to look like voluntary, he was pushed, he was forced, so that you get some dignity. They didn't want it to look like he's been sacked, and so okay, you come out to say that you have resigned, so that they will not put the blame on the executive arm of government. They wouldn't put the blame. But you see, for us to build a credible parliament that serves as countervailing authority, for us to build a credible parliament that promotes constitutionalism, we would have to put in place mechanisms to ensure that Parliament asserts its independence from the control of the executive arm of government. And that's how come, in my view, the constitutional review process shouldn't have been aborted. Thankfully, I've heard the NDC, I've read their manifesto saying that they would reintroduce that process and ensure that the process is carried to its logical conclusion. See, our constitution is a fundamental law of the land that regulates everything. Our very essence of being, the constitution regulates it. And so if it is faulty, then we have problems, or our very essence of living and our political life would also be faulty. Our development, our efforts are bringing about development would always hit a snag because the constitution itself is faulty. And so it is the lifeblood of our political and democratic existence. It is faulty, and unless it is fixed, then you have some of these problems, going on. And so I keep asking myself, last night as I was pondering over this, I was also asking myself, now that the man has been made to undergo a voluntary compulsory retirement, what is going to be happening to his ministry? The Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. It is with the greatest of respect, it is a ministry that shouldn't have been created in the first place. You remember that it was J. Kufuor who, how dare you create a ministry? You see, it is the height of political kinkonism, the height of the executive's effort to bring the legislative or parliamentary arm of government under its control. How dare you go create or set up a ministry in charge of parliamentary affairs? That will mean making parliament subservient to the executive arm of government. And so in 2005, when the African peer review mechanism under the NEPAD came to review our governance process, they told President Kufuor that you cannot have a Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. You must scrap it. Sure. Well, Kufuor listened to them, but he didn't scrap that ministry. When Atanos became president, he scrapped it. And the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs never existed from 2008 until 2017, when Akufo-Addo became president. He reintroduced it. And I didn't know really what exactly they were doing. Now, and if it's a ministry, it's a ministry. It will have resources to have people working there and all. Sure. Now that Osechi Mensah Bonsu has been pushed in a semblance of voluntary compulsory retirement, what is going to happen to that ministry? I think it is courteous for the good people of Ghana to be made to know the future of that ministry. If it's been scrapped, the president must tell us. If it is just going to be an avenue where some public servants will go and be drawing salary without really working, we should be in the know so we can decide as a people what we want to do by those who are perpetuating this kind of corrupt waste.
Okay, so Prof, in other words, we have democratic leaders who are happy to exert some sort of dictatorial powers. That's what our constitution literally does.
Yeah. I mean,
and everybody's happy to just taste a bit of dictatorialism, yes, even though in essence we're practicing democracy.
Yeah, but our constitution is not a constitution that must be entertained in any democratic, practice, because it does not promote constitutionalism. Listen, so when we talk about constitutionalism, it is not about having a constitution. Okay, constitutionalism is different from having a constitution guiding you. So when we talk about constitutionalism, it's a political theory originated by a scholar called John Locke. Okay, he's the father of constitutionalism. He says that when we talk about constitutionalism, it's about checking, shackling, bridling the exercise of power. So putting in place mechanisms that will check the exercise of power. Sure. That is when you have constitutionalism. And so a constitution promotes constitutionalism so long as it contains provisions that would curtail or check the exercise of power. But our constitution, that 1992 constitution, it does not check the exercise of powers. It's rather expand the frontiers of power. Okay, so to that extent, you can say that even though we have the 1992 constitution, the constitution itself does not promote constitutionalism.
Okay.
And so it is a certain arranged document that give more powers to those who occupy. But like I said, power corrupts.
Okay.
And absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
And Prof, in that same vein, you have new force or new third parties that want to break through the NDC-NPP monopoly. They haven't been successful. And this time around, we have a person from the party in government, in the person of Mr. Alan Tremanting, going independent with his butterfly movement for change. Then you have a young man who, Bediakon, aka Cheddar, who also says that he represents the new force. Now, when he goes on interview, and I'm going to pick something that he said, when he goes on interview, he's interrogated by money, his source of wealth, and he gets so upset when he's asked. And I would read something that he talked about money here. Okay. He says that people should focus on what I can do for the country, not where I get my money from. And in fact, he declines interviews that would ask him about money. And yes, there's a CDD report, research in 2021 that said that for a person to be a president of this country, that person needed $100 million. So is it money that is preventing people from contesting, from us getting a formidable third force? Or is it that the system just makes it so hard? The NPP and just have so much grounding that nobody can break through.
It is money.
Yeah.
And money would bring in incompetent people who would not be able to fashion out credible developmental projects that would lift us from our economic doldrums, that will lift us from our poverty and underdevelopment.
Okay.
It's always been money.
So then you have people who say, I have money, but I can't tell you where I got my money from. So because I just want to develop the nation.
Well, that's a different thing. That's one. I think inviting me to make comment on that. I think that one it's a no-brainer. If you have money and you don't want people to know your source of money, then definitely you raise more eyebrows than everyone else. So I think that one must not be something that, in my view, we should really waste much time on. But the point is that we should be careful because in parliamentary elections, for instance, I've never respected the caliber of people. Many of the people who have emerged recently as parliamentary candidates because they are products of money. It is he who is able to pay more who gets through and who is elected. And so,
and we're seeing it in the primaries of the NPP, for instance.
That's what I'm talking about. So those who really can help the people, they cannot be given the opportunity. I believe in working at every task that is reposed in me without failing. But I cannot be an MP in my area because I wouldn't be able to. In fact, I would not pay to go and serve. I'm the UTAC president in this university. Okay, in deciding on being the UTAC president, it was my own colleagues who came to tell me that we think that you can do it. And so they gave me the mandate. They said, we have confidence in you. We think that you have the resilience, you have the fortitude, you have the strong will to be able to push for better conditions of service for university teachers. So they told me this, and they said, go there, you have our support, you'll be able to do it. I didn't pay them money. And so, upon receiving this mandate, I feel humbled that my people have this kind of confidence in me, and so I must serve them. And so you can attempt to bribe me, but it will not succeed because I am humbled by the kind of confidence that my people have reposed in me. I didn't pay to be in this capacity. Nobody, no servants pay to go and serve. A servant goes to serve and afterwards he is rewarded. But in our very nauseating democratic parliamentary electioneering campaign practice, servants will have to now pay money just to be able to go and serve. And I asked those who receive the money that after receiving those 10 cities and 20 cities,
now it's 200 and you 5,000 primaries.
After receiving those, do you think about the future of your own children, your own future? Okay, once I am able to pay those monies to you, I am done with you. They go and
you cannot demand of me any development.
They think about how to recoup the monies that have been spent, monies that would have been used to build projects in the community that would have been beneficial for all, are shared 10, 20 cities. So there is something wrong with our psyche. Okay, but the point is that you cannot also blame the voter too much. Why? Because one cardinal feature of every developing democracy is ignorance of the citizenry. Okay, so every serious government and political leader must also put in place budget allocation and funding that is aimed at addressing public ignorance. Without an informed citizenry, there cannot be development. Okay, but you see, an enlightened and a very informed citizenry is not in the interest of the today's corrupt Ghanaian politician. That is how come they will continue to financially suffocate the National Commission for Civic Education so that it is unable to do what it is supposed to do to bring about an enlightened citizenry. So that is our challenge. If the citizenry is enlightened and tomorrow you are going to give them money, they will tell you that no, keep the money. Don't go and take anybody's loan. Keep the money so that tomorrow when you are a member of parliament, tomorrow when you are president, you have enough to build projects that would be beneficial to all of us. They would see through. But because they are also ignorant, they are always thinking about my dada is buying there. Give us our daily bread today. And you see, it is a mess in Ghana. Yeah. But I believe that with time, as we keep doing some of these things and socializing people, it is difficult talking about some of these things and yet seeing virtually no change. Okay, but we believe that with time, we'll be able to get there where our Prof, people will be properly socialized into the dogmas of democracy such that the idea of monetization of electoral processes will be drastically, reduced.
So, Prof, if I'm looking at, so Alan Chamanti needs about $100 million, Cheddar needs about $100 million, Dr. Sam Ankara also needs about $100 million. So if they fail, it means they will have to come back again, another $100 million. So should we just leave the country in the hands of NPP and DC then?
No. You see, there is this, listen, theoretically, Andrew Haywood and co have argued that partisan de-alignment is difficult in transitional democracy. What he means is that it is difficult for people to move from NDC to support MPP and vice versa. See, just like me, I will support Chelsea, whether you call it
Women's Fellowship,
the whole world hates Chelsea, but me, I will not quit.
Right.
Okay. That's our attitude to also political parties. So it is oftentimes difficult. But the reason why, in my view, we haven't had a third force has been that since 1992, we haven't had the personality that has that kind of pedigree to be able to cause serious incursion. I've looked at the profile of all the personalities, but for the first time, I believe that kind of personality that has the pedigree to be able to cause serious incursion into the 2024 election is in the person of Alan Chamanti. I think that if I look at him and compare him to the other people who have tried, I think he stands tall. And if even Goom came third in the 2020 elections, then I think no political elite can afford to be complacent because Alan would also be a force to reckon with in the 2024 elections.
Professor Gyampo, I want to say thank you very much for coming on one-on-one. Yes, you can leave us your comments on all our social media platforms. My name is Bridget, so have a good evening.